Welcome to Self-Service at Retail. The growth has only begun. Retail self-service has been growing at a fast pace over the past several years, a trend that the COVID-19 pandemic has abetted. A key factor, no doubt, has been the growth of online sales at retail. Adobe expects over $4 trillion to be spent globally in all of 2021, a new milestone for e-commerce. A Markets and Markets report claims the global interactive kiosk market could be worth $30.53 billion by 2023, a $10 billion increase from 2016. How long will this growth continue? I'm Elliot Maris, the editor of Kiosk Marketplace. Here to help answer this very important question are two experts from Zebra Technologies. Richard Thompson, Sales Vice President of Global OEM, and Mark Thompson, Director of Retail and Hospitality Solutions for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Mark, is self-service growing in retail, or are shoppers returning to more traditional shopping methods?
That's a good question. So first of all, it's great to be able to discuss this topic with you, Elliot. And I think there's a lot of change that's happened in the last 2 years or so as the pandemic has rolled across the world. So I guess to answer the question, for me, it's almost more complex than that. Of course, there is some return to store-based shopping, and we've actually seen the latest footfall figures for Europe have come out in the last couple of days. And we actually see that footfall is still down between 13 and 30%, depending on country, based on the sort of pre-pandemic 2019 numbers. So shoppers are not 100% returning to their traditional behavior. And as you mentioned, that's largely related to the fact that a lot of retail has shifted online and people have gained that confidence and trust level with buying products online. But what we're certainly seeing in terms of, physical retail is that the shoppers that have returned are certainly increasing their use of self-service methodologies, whether that's scan and go type services or use of kiosks in a grocery store, or indeed use of kiosks and pay at pump in forecourt. So self-service has definitely become something that's top of mind for both shoppers and for the retailers. And there's a lot of pressures that are driving that. Richard, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk about that at all.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. And again, thank you, Elliot, for hosting us again. Great to be with you. I agree. I think, from a self-service point of view, from all the customers that we sell to, who produce and manufacture kiosks, they are definitely seeing a continued growth. But I think it also goes hand in hand with a couple of other things. I think we start to see now more and more growth in the likes of self-checkout in the retail store versus the traditional point of sale, and we see more and more retailers migrating towards more self-checkout than they've had before. Still with a mix, but nonetheless, I think it's all about convenience and self-service. I think, as you rightly said, Elliot, the pandemic I think really has accelerated that growth, and I think generally from all the people I've spoken to, customers and users, if you like, are just becoming more au fait with the technology and happier to interact with a kiosk than perhaps they were in the past. And I certainly think we see that playing out in across the world in all different territories. And I don't think it will stop. I think it goes hand in hand with the growth of convenience itself. We've seen that in the retail environment, more of a shift to convenience type stores versus larger brick and mortar stores, and more convenience for the customer. And I think that's what kiosk brings. It brings convenience. It brings another way in which you can shop, and if you want to, whilst you still have other alternatives as well. And I think that's what we will continue to see. And as we see that, I think the mix will continue to shift more towards the convenience and more towards the use of self-service and kiosks as part of that?
Well, is the same thing happening in the hospitality sector?
From what I can see, yes. In fact, it's probably more visible in hospitality, because hospitality has always been far more experienced focused than the retail sector itself. And people in attending hospitality venues, whether it's theme parks or quick service restaurants, etc., have always been less tolerant of queues than we have traditionally in the retail sector. So absolutely, we are seeing the increased use of self-service technologies. In fact, look at most quick service restaurants now, you don't go to the counter to order, you go to a kiosk screen to order. And I think that will only continue, driven by a number of things. It's the consumer's expectation that they want to be served straight away is driving that. So they don't want to queue, they want to be served. And the kiosk gives them the ability at least to feel as though they're being served straight away. Plus the fact that the cost of wages and the difficulty in finding staff is exacerbated the problem for both retailers and hospitality businesses. So there's a number of pressures driving to the increase in use of self-service technologies.
Yeah, I'd agree, Mark. I think whilst it's exacerbated the things you identified definitely have exacerbated the challenge, I think it's also driven the acceleration to the use of it. And I think through the pandemic, we've seen the kind of obvious want to use more kiosks, but obviously there was a point in time where quick service restaurants, particularly, a lot of them were closed. But it actually gave people the time to sort of take a step back and think about how will they implement this kind of technology if they haven't already, or improve it or do more with it. And I think, from all of the customers we have in the kiosk space, we are definitely seeing a growth in that quick service restaurant space, even as we continue. And I think, there are definitely now large quick service restaurant companies who will have either one as a bit of a backup or even no point of sale places within a QSR at all. Which actually frees them up more space for customers that are waiting for pickup when they've used a kiosk, and more space to put more kiosks. And I think if you talk to some of the quick service restaurant owners, they've seen significant increase in the value of spend. And I think this is a bit more European focused, because there's more tendency to go into the store in Europe in a quick service restaurant versus use the drive-through. But certainly in those circumstances, they are seeing larger footfall in the store and larger spend per person using the kiosk, particularly as the kiosks become more upgraded, if you like, in terms of functionality. There's a lot of work being done on software functionality that you may have seen in kiosks, in a QSR type environment where offers can come up, and the use of scanning in the kiosk is becoming more popular now for things like couponing and loyalty, whereas there's typically always been a scanner in a kiosk, but not so much used. But we're definitely seeing the uptick of that now, and more functionality and more interaction with the customer. So I think it's making it easier for the customer. The customer's therefore prepared to use that format of purchase, and is actually spending more when they do. So I think it's a positive sign for the industry, full stop. But we are seeing it expand beyond that as well, and we are seeing, even at the drive-through, more of a kiosk type approach than the perhaps traditional voice interaction with somebody inside the store. And again, that's more in a sort of US type centric customer base, where there is more tendency to use the drive-through than there is to go in store. So I think different organizations are adapting in different ways, but all of them are adopting the technology and using it to drive more efficiency, which ultimately makes the shopping experience, the purchasing experience, better for the customer, and hand in hand helps them grow their revenues. So I think it's on a positive momentum for sure.
Okay. Well, let's home in on the relation between e-commerce and self-service. What specific impact does the shift to online retail have on kiosks and self-service?
I think it's a really good question, and I think it has almost a direct impact in the sense that the more that retail itself shifts or portions of it shift online, the more consumers get used to very, very slick and smart interfaces. And to an extent, what Richard was talking about there in terms of the software, the user interface, I think there is pressure on the kiosk industry to ensure that interface is very smart, very slick. It is integrated with CRM data, so it drives both loyalty, but also cross-sell and upsell at the same time, but in a very smart way that is appropriate to the person using it at the time. So I certainly see this shift online will also help with the analytics around that and the data that then goes back to both hospitality and retail companies. So I think it's a positive shift, but I think it drives pressure to ensure that the kiosks and the interfaces are updated probably way more regularly than they are right now.
I think the other thing I'd add to that is that whilst, as Mark said, footfall is still down per se in retail, but it's picking back up. But I think the shift to online means, I think what we see, what the trends we observe are that the customers ultimately use online as the first instance, perhaps, but they want overall a convenient omni-channel way to shop. Convenience means many options, and it's different options for different people's preferences. But it's those preferences that drive, if you meet all the relevant preferences of your customer base, you're going to have a better customer experience and therefore, more propensity to be able to upsell, cross-sell, and obviously to maintain loyalty. So I think things like buy online and pick up in store are actually driving business in the kiosk space as well. So, it might be pick up from a kiosk. You interface with a kiosk to say, yes, I've arrived at the store to pick up my goods, and the goods will be brought straight to you. But likewise, another area we're seeing a growth in kiosk is what you might call a returns kiosk. So whilst we, online is driving a lot of home delivery or pick up in store, it's also driving a lot of return, and that constant thing where people, particularly in the apparel space, will buy 3 different sizes of a particular item of clothing and choose the one they want and take 2 back. And that's, I think retailers have almost become accepting of that because it's a convenient way to do it and it's what customers want. And those that get it right and do it well actually, are benefiting from that, and in terms of further spend and loyalty again. So we are seeing a growing demand in that kind of returns kiosk. So you go back, you interface into a kiosk, you might drop your package into a bag that might or a box that might have an RFID reader in it, or certainly a barcode scanner to scan the returns label. But it's very easy, therefore, you get a receipt to say, yes, I've returned it. That's it. That's all you have to do, and you can go about your day. And that's very, very convenient for people. And people, I think we will certainly see, a continued use of that. And, kiosks becoming more multifunction, as they might be the ordering kiosk, they might be the information kiosk, they might be the returns kiosk, and all of that in one. Or they might be associated with a drop box or a smart locker, whereby you interface to the kiosk, but your goods are returned into the smart locker or taken from the smart locker. And we've even seen some customers now that you can actually go into, in essence, a people-less store, which is a big smart locker. Your interface is a kiosk, and your order is delivered to a drawer in that kiosk whilst you wait, having ordered at the kiosk. So, there's some really innovative solutions coming along that continue to drive the kiosk market.
Okay. Well, let's talk about an issue that's on a lot of people's minds. How do staff fit into the picture? Is self-service a way to reduce staff?
I guess shall I jump in there briefly? So certainly what I'm seeing, and I'm talking to retailers on a near daily basis. They have a major challenge at the moment, and that is finding staff. So I don't think it's necessarily a way to actively reduce staff because retailers or hospitality companies don't want them. I think they are faced with a challenge, both in terms of being able to find staff and also the cost of staff when they do find them. So what we're certainly seeing is that there is a real pressure to ensure that when you do have staff, that they are highly productive and that they're doing high value activities. And so I think the self-serve elements are parts that can be, I guess, take away from what the staff were doing in terms of more mundane and transactional activities that staff really don't need to do, that can be just as well done by a kiosk or a self-service tool.
Yeah, I agree. And I think whilst Mark spends a lot of time talking to retailers themselves, my team and I spend a lot of time talking to the manufacturers and integrators of the kiosk type technology. And they're talking to their customers, the retailers, and the feedback we get through that channel is that, a very similar sort of point of view, in that the self-service capability and the kiosks enable that convenience and therefore enable those staff to have their time freed up to do more high value activities, rather than the sort of perhaps traditional, let's call it, activities, which might be, in a large proportion of the discussions I've had, that primary focus of that freeing up time is so that those store associates can better serve the customer in the store or customers in the store, whilst other customers are shopping self-service through a kiosk interface. So that makes the overall store experience better. And it also means they can focus on other perhaps sometimes time-consuming activities like replenishment, because there's less propensity for the staff to be called away from replenishment to do something, perhaps at the point of sale, because the point of sale or the initial interface is being managed by the kiosk. So it actually makes the store more efficient in that respect as well. So it's kind of a win-win, I think, driven by the technology.
Looking to the future, what new technology innovations will impact the self-service arena in the next few years?
So I guess, Richard, you've probably got more insight in this talking to some of the manufacturers there, but certainly two of the innovations that I'm seeing that I think will have an impact on the kiosk and self-service arena, first of all, is voice interaction. We're already seeing it in our own homes, the ability to interact with Alexa devices, Siri devices, Google devices in your own home to either answer questions or to get information, and I think that will have an impact so that we don't, and it makes it even less contact. So I think from a sanitization point of view, it's even better as well. And then the other side of it will be things like image recognition or computer vision. As technologies are advancing rapidly, so being able to recognize my face and then automatically the screen maybe flips to the booking that I've already made with the hotel or the restaurant or the food that I would typically buy, etc. So I think those two things for me would be the leaders. I don't know, Richard, if you've got any others.
Yeah, similar. I think I think one thing the pandemic did drive, and I'm not entirely sure whether it's a really big driver at this time, is that non-touch interaction, so facial recognition and voice interaction. We definitely have seen innovative kiosk vendors implement that technology in their kiosks, and it's really cool when you see it work, and it works very, very well. The technology has come on leaps and bounds in the last 5 years in that space, particularly in the sort of gesturing type technology where you don't physically touch the screen, you just move your hand in front of it, a little bit like a lot of people will see from an interface in a car these days. So we've seen a number of people bring that technology about, but I'm not actually seeing yet a big deployment of that. I think that's finding its way at the moment, I would say. But I think the other thing I touched on a little earlier as well that I see more of in the sort of near term happening is the kind of the bringing together of multiple type products and technologies to bring a more holistic solution for the customer. So kiosks that are interacting with smart lockers, and kiosks that are interacting with drop boxes or return boxes. Pick up online, order in store, pick up in store versus order online, pick up in store, that kind of thing. We're seeing multiple technologies come together, and we're seeing sometimes companies partnering with one another to deliver that, but also, kiosk vendors in certain circumstances sort of broadening their portfolios to meet the demand of the retailer in order to achieve that sort of more convenient shopping solution. So I think that's what will evolve, and that's what will drive new technologies that require additional things. Like it might be facial recognition entering a kiosk-based unmanned store, for example, as well as just facial recognition on the kiosk itself. So I think there's a multitude of technologies that are applicable. But ultimately, really, I think kiosks have come a long way in terms of their functionality and the benefit they provide to the retailer. I think that's certainly something that's now been recognized and is fast being adopted, because it brings better functionality, better shopper experience, better loyalty, ultimately bigger revenues, better in-store experience. So there's not that many negatives, I think, and that's the good thing. So, the technology as it is today is also, helping us drive more business and growth in the space. So that's kind of how I see it right now.
Okay, great. Well, this takes us to the end of our interview. Thank you, Mark and Richard, for sharing your insights on this critical topic. This has been Self-Service at Retail. The growth has only begun. Thank you all for joining us.